hurried footsteps broke the silence inside Harvard's grand mathematics building. Director William Callahan, a world-famous mathematician known for his strict discipline, had returned to his office after midnight. He'd forgotten some crucial documents for the next day's global conference. As he walked down the corridor, a faint light spilled out from the amphitheater door. He frowned. It was 2:17 a.m. No one should have been there. Pushing the door open, he froze. At the front of the room stood a young girl, barely a teenager, her curly hair tied up, eyes locked on the blackboard. Her hands moved quickly, filling the board with symbols and formulas that only experts could follow. She was solving his equation, the one that had left even his top PhD students defeated. She hadn't noticed him. She whispered quietly to herself, her chalk tapping rhythmically against the board. "What do you think you're doing here?" His voice echoed through the empty hall. The girl spun around, startled. The chalk slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her wide eyes revealed fear, then quiet acceptance, as if being caught was something familiar. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I didn't mean any harm. My father works here. He's on the cleaning crew. William stepped closer, glancing at the complex solution she had written. "Who are you and how did you get in?" "My name is Zora," she said softly. "When my dad works the night shift, I wait in the break room. But tonight I saw this problem on the board and I wanted to try." William studied her, maybe 14 years old, wearing a worn coat and old sneakers, but her eyes glowed with rare intelligence. He pointed at the board. "Do you even understand what this means?" Zora nodded nervously. "It's an optimization equation with nonlinear constraints," she explained, her voice gaining confidence. "I used a modified Lagrange method to find the optimal point. But if you apply a logarithmic transformation first, it simplifies the system." William blinked. In 30 years of academia, he had met only a handful of minds capable of explaining such concepts, and none this young. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "In books," Zora replied simply. "I read when my father works. Sometimes I listen outside your lectures. And I borrow books from the public library." A memory struck him. How his shelves had sometimes been slightly out of order in the mornings. Now he knew why. "I'm really sorry," Zora said, gathering her frayed backpack. "Please don't tell my dad. He doesn't know I do this." As she turned to leave, William made a decision that surprised even himself. "Wait," he said sharply. She froze. "Finish it." "Sir?" "Finish the equation," he repeated, handing her a new piece of chalk. Her hands trembled as she took it, but as she turned back to the board, something changed. The fear vanished. Her posture straightened. Her focus sharpened. Line by line, the symbols flowed effortlessly from her hand, forming a breathtaking pattern of logic and beauty. What Director Callahan didn't yet realize was that behind this quiet teenager stood a mind that had found in mathematics not just escape, but purpose. For 3 years, she had been silently building her own path inside the halls of Harvard, discovering a brilliance that no one had ever seen. That night, a single encounter between a janitor's daughter and a world-renowned mathematician would ignite a story that challenged everything people believed about opportunity, talent, and human potential. Director Callahan had remained completely silent as Zora finished writing. His expression was impossible to read. When she set the chalk down, he gave a single nod and said only, "Come back tomorrow, same time." Then he gathered his papers and left the room, leaving Zora frozen in front of the blackboard, her heart racing. The next morning, in their tiny one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, her father noticed her distraction. "Everything all right, Zoe?" Thomas asked, his voice tired after another long night of cleaning. "Nothing's wrong, Dad," she said quickly, staring at her plate. But it wasn't true. How could she explain that she had broken her promise to stay in the staff room, that the director had caught her in the amphitheater, and instead of punishing her, had invited her back? All day at her local public school, Zora couldn't focus. While her teacher, Mrs. Collins, explained quadratic equations to a half-asleep class, Zora's thoughts were already miles ahead, drifting toward far more complex ideas. "Zora," Mrs. Collins called suddenly, "would you like to show us how to solve this problem?" Zora glanced at the board. The equation was so simple that she barely had to think. She solved it calmly, while a few classmates whispered under their breath, "Nerd, weirdo." It didn't bother her anymore. What bothered her was the feeling that she was wasting precious time repeating what she had mastered years ago. After class, Mrs. Collins stopped her. "You seem distracted today," she said kindly. "Is something going on?" Zora hesitated, then decided to tell her. "I met someone, a teacher. He saw my work, and I think he wants to help me." Mrs. Collins smiled warmly. She was the only teacher who had ever recognized Zora's gift, often giving her extra books and harder problems. "That's wonderful," she said. "You've always needed a more challenging environment." "But what if it's nothing?" Zora whispered. "What if he's just curious for a moment and then forgets me?" Mrs. Collins sat beside her. "Zora, your talent is a rare gift. Don't let anyone make you doubt it, not even yourself." That night, Zora went back to Harvard with her father. As they walked through the quiet corridors, she finally gathered the courage to tell him everything. "You did what?" "Chaperon." Thomas stopped in disbelief. "So, you could have gotten me fired. Harvard isn't a playground. These people—" "It wasn't a game, Dad," she interrupted. "I was studying, solving equations." "In rooms you're not supposed to enter," he snapped, "using boards that aren't yours. We don't belong in that world, Zora. I'm there to clean, not to. So your daughter can learn," she finished softly, her voice trembling but firm. "He asked me to come back. Maybe it's an opportunity." Thomas rubbed his face, exhausted. "An opportunity for what? For some rich man to watch a poor kid do tricks with numbers? He's known for being cold, Zora. He doesn't trust people like us." Zora bit her lip. She wanted to say that when Callahan looked at her, she hadn't seen coldness. She had seen recognition. But before she could speak, they reached the math department. "Go to the staff room," her father said firmly, "and stay there." Zora obeyed. She sat alone in the small, dim room filled with cleaning supplies and old furniture. From her worn backpack, she pulled out her notebook filled with copied theorems, equations, and problems she had solved on her own. 2 hours passed. Then the door creaked open. Standing there was Director Callahan, a folder tucked under his arm. "You didn't show up," he said simply. "My father won't let me," Zora answered quietly. He nodded, as if he'd expected that. "Your father's a wise man. He just wants to protect you." There was a pause, long, heavy, uncertain. Then, to her surprise, Callahan extended the folder toward her. "This is for you. Inside were 5 advanced problems, the kind used in international math Olympiads." Zora looked up, confused. "Why are you giving me these?" "Curiosity," he said. "I want to see what you'll do with them." Over the next few nights, Zora stayed hidden in the staff room while her father worked, filling page after page with calculations. Each time, Callahan appeared quietly, exchanged only a few words, and left new challenges. He rarely smiled. He never said whether he was impressed, but he kept coming back. On the 3rd night, things changed. He wasn't alone. At his side stood Professor Marcus Winters, a senior scholar known for his arrogance. "So this is the girl?" Winters said, staring at Zora as though she were an exhibit. "The little human calculator?" Zora felt her face grow hot. Without asking permission, Winters snatched her notes, skimmed through them, and gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Interesting," he said coldly, "but clearly amateur work." "Raw talent without refinement," Professor Winters said with a smirk. "You can't seriously be considering—" "We're not here for that, Marcus," Director Callahan interrupted coldly. Winters left with a huff. For a moment, the great William Callahan, known for his precision and authority, looked almost embarrassed. "Don't mind him," he said quietly. "Some academics mistake arrogance for intelligence." It was the first time Zora had seen the director show anything close to warmth, and she realized then something deeper was going on. What she didn't know was that, behind the scenes, Callahan was fighting a quiet war. For years, he'd been pushing for a program that would open Harvard's doors to gifted students from overlooked communities and meeting fierce resistance from people like Winters. Without realizing it, Zora had become his proof, his secret example that genius could bloom anywhere, if only someone noticed. 2 weeks passed since that awkward night. Every evening, Zora returned to Harvard with her father. While Thomas polished the marble floors, his daughter filled notebook after notebook in the dim staff room, solving problems that would make graduate students sweat. Then one evening, Callahan arrived looking different, no stack of problems, no equations. He carried only a single folded brochure. "There's a conference tomorrow," he said, placing it on the table. "The Access and Diversity Committee will vote on next year's budget." Zora frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been advocating a scholarship program," he explained, "one that finds and supports young minds like yours." And suddenly everything made sense. The tests, the quiet meetings, even Winter's visit. "You're using me as an example," Zora said hesitantly. "Documenting your potential," he corrected. "Harvard wastes talent behind invisible walls. I need something undeniable to change that." She stared at him. "And what exactly do you want me to do?" "Show them," he said simply. "Show them what I already know." Before she could reply, Thomas stepped into the doorway. He had heard everything. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "You want to parade her like a showpiece?" "Dad," Zora began, but he cut her off. "No, Zoe, they don't care about you. They care about what you represent. A story, a headline, something they can applaud and forget." William stayed calm. "Your father's right to be cautious. Harvard has used people as symbols before," he admitted. "But this isn't about charity. I'm not trying to decorate the system. I'm trying to change it." The next afternoon, Maxwell Auditorium was full. Every seat taken. The air buzzed with quiet tension. Director Callahan stepped up to the podium. "The Horizons program," he began, "is designed to identify and support exceptionally gifted students from underrepresented communities." Zora sat near the back, almost hidden, her father beside her, tense, wary. "The program will cost $2–3 million annually," William continued. "Some may see that as excessive." Professor Winters cleared his throat dramatically. "We cannot fund social experiments based on isolated examples," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Where's the evidence?" William nodded. "A fair question. What would you consider evidence, Marcus?" "Hard data," Winters replied. "Not fairy tales about that little janitor's kid you've been mentoring." A hush swept through the room. "Little janitor?" William repeated evenly. "You mean the student who solved the Bernoulli-Euler problem you once called unsolvable by lay minds?" Winters paled. "That's impossible. No child could—" "I have here," Callahan said, clicking the remote, 5 Olympiad-level problems solved by this student 3 with original methods unseen in academic literature." The room went silent. Several professors leaned forward, astonished. "Fascinating," Winters muttered, "but still just a lucky anomaly." That's when Zora stood up. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice trembled at first but grew stronger with each word. "I'm not an anomaly. I'm 14, and I love math." Thomas reached for her arm, whispering for her to sit down, but she was already walking toward the stage. All eyes followed the brave teenager who dared to speak in Harvard's most sacred hall. "And I'm not the only one," she continued. "There are kids at my school, 5 at least, who could be here too if they had access to the same books and classes." Winter's face turned red. "This is absurd. How did this child even get in here?" "Security. Miss Thompson is here as my guest," William interjected firmly. Then from the front row, an elderly professor stood. "Are you the young lady with the equations?" he asked kindly. "Tell me, how did you approach the transformation in problem number 4? Without a second of hesitation, Zora walked up to the whiteboard. She picked up a marker and began to explain. Her hand moved with effortless precision, her words flowing like music as she broke down complex logarithmic transformations step by step. Equations and functions filled the board until even the skeptics fell silent, watching the mind of a child reveal beauty in numbers that few adults could grasp. The silence was absolute. Not a whisper, not a breath. Every eye in the room was locked on the whiteboard where Zora stood, finishing her explanation. Even the skeptics who had rolled their eyes minutes earlier now sat frozen in awe. When she put the marker down, the elderly professor in the front row began to clap. Slowly, others joined in, until the entire auditorium erupted in applause. From the back of the room, Director Callahan watched with a faint, knowing smile. This, he said, taking the microphone, is just one mind. One that nearly slipped through the cracks because our systems weren't designed to find it. The real question is, how many more are we missing right now? The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. 14 in favor, 3 against. But it was enough. The Horizons program had officially been approved. As the crowd began to leave, Professor Winters stormed toward Callahan, his face twisted in fury. You turned a serious meeting into an emotional circus, Callahan. This isn't over. William met his glare calmly. No, Marcus, he said. It's not over. It's just beginning. What no one in that room realized was that Zora's true genius wasn't only in her ability to solve impossible equations. It was in her courage to challenge a world that never expected her to belong, and that was only the beginning. A year later, the Horizons program was no longer a proposal. It was a movement reshaping the campus of Harvard and spreading to other universities across the country. From his office window, William Callahan watched as Zora crossed the courtyard below. No longer a quiet girl hiding in shadows, she now wore an official Harvard badge with her name printed proudly. Her steps were steady, her gaze confident. Sir, said his assistant, entering with a folder, the preliminary results are in. The programs exceeded every projection. William flipped through the report. 47 students from underserved communities had been identified and awarded full scholarships within the first year. Their average scores now rivaled Harvard's best-performing students. A discreet smile crossed his face. And Winters? The assistant hesitated. He resigned last week. Columbia had offered him a position, but they withdrew it. Why? The recording, she said quietly. A leaked video had captured Winters mocking the Horizon students, calling them charity projects. The footage spread across academic networks within hours. His reputation collapsed overnight. He created his own fate, William said simply, closing the folder. That afternoon, Callahan made his way to the cafeteria where the biannual Horizons meeting was underway. The room was alive with energy young people from every background, discussing advanced math, physics, and engineering with the kind of excitement that only comes when opportunity finally meets talent. In one corner, Zora stood surrounded by freshmen, explaining the principles of non-Euclidean geometry. Her hands moved quickly, her voice clear and confident. When she noticed William at the door, she smiled and waved before finishing her explanation. I thought you'd like to know, she said as she approached him. 5 students from my old school just got accepted into the next cycle of the program. William nodded proudly. Your outreach work is making a real difference. Zora had become the program's unofficial ambassador, returning to her community, mentoring others, and helping uncover hidden brilliance where no one had bothered to look. And your father? William asked softly. She smiled. He doesn't clean at night anymore. He's the logistics coordinator for Horizons now. He knows every inch of this campus better than anyone. What had begun as a chance encounter at 2 a.m. had grown into a transformation that neither of them could have imagined, changing not just 2 lives but the very foundation of an institution. A week later, during a special event attended by representatives from 12 universities, Zora took the stage. I used to think places like Harvard weren't made for people like me, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. And in many ways I was right. These institutions were built by and for privilege. But institutions can change when people decide that talent shouldn't be wasted just because it's born in the wrong place. In the front row, her father watched with tears in his eyes. And Director Callahan, standing near the exit, felt something rare for a man of reason hope. Because sometimes brilliance doesn't come from the brightest classrooms. It shines from the quiet corners, waiting for someone to open the door. Standing beside Director Callahan in the front row was Mrs. Collins, Zora's former public school teacher, now a proud consultant for the Horizons program. On stage, Zora continued her speech, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Genius, she said, is not privilege. Genius is persistence. It's staying up late in a staff room because you have nowhere else to study. It's turning every obstacle into a stepping stone. When she finished, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause thundered, echoing through the hall as reporters and cameras captured the moment. From the back of the room, William Callahan noticed a group of media executives exchanging glances. The story was spreading fast. Soon, the Horizons model would expand beyond Harvard, reaching universities across the nation. After the event, as they walked together under the evening lights, Thomas looked from his daughter to Callahan. "When you found her that night," he asked quietly, "were you testing a theory or looking for proof?" William thought for a long moment before replying. "I was looking for a reason to believe that real change was possible," he said softly, "and I found it. Because the true victory wasn't just in the equation Zora could solve, or even in the program she inspired. It was in the transformation of an entire system that had ignored countless brilliant minds for centuries, simply because they didn't fit the mold. And as Zora proved every single day, the greatest battle isn't always against a person, but against a system that never expected you to exist. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice, your curiosity, your story could be the next spark that changes everything.